Alright, Department of Education, Part 3452, Solicitation Provision, Contract Clauses, 224.72, Research Involved with Human Activities, October 23, 2023. In accordance with the Department of Education, with the Regulation for the Protection of the Human Subject of the Reach of the Title 34C of the Regulation, Part 97 of the Regulation, Contract, Subcontract, Engage, cover knowledge for the research activities, for the interest for the protection of the human subject of the contract must include the substance of the call of the subcontract with the conditions of the contract. Should notify other and known of the contract engaged with the cover of the research activity responsible to comply with the regulations defined in 34 CFR 97.102 with they apply with its cause. Use law of the cover of the research of the meaning of the research involved with the human subject of not exempt with the Title 34 CFR 97.104 and 97.401B. In the Department of the Purpose of the research activities involved with the human subject to cover the not exempt with the regulation of the contractor officer with the contracting officer representative require the contractor to apply with the federal wildlife insurance the office of the human resources protection with the Department of Human Health Services. Contractor does not already have the certification on file. The contracting officer will also cover the contractor of the obligation obtained and support and sustain obtained and sent with the Department of the Documentation Institutional Review Board with approval of the proposed research. There are no conditions for the contractor to allow the conduct of the research or activity involved with the human subject of the Department to receive with the certification proposal of the research has been reviewed approved with the Institutional Review Board with no search involved with the human subject to be initiated done with the contract with the contractor approved added central contracting authority and properly complete with the certification form with the initial review and institutional review board approved with the research activity contract with the contract with the representative has acknowledged receipt with the certification form of the Title 34 CFR 97.109 with the F1 with you with the institutional review board. The department determined that otherwise to continue with the review of the search reach for the time required with the following conditions. Research eligibility explained with the review with the research with the review by the institutional review board account with the limited institutional review board review to describe in the Title 34 CFR 97.104 D2 3 or research with the initial institutional review board approved study with the prerogative of the point with involved with only one or both of the following analysis with including identifiable private information, identifiable biospecimen, except for the full up clinic data for the intervention of the subject with the would undergo as part of the clinical care with each of the activities done with the contract required with the continue with the review. Contractor submit with the annual written representation with the contract with the contractor with the representative statute with the research activity being reviewed approved with the institutional review board within previous 12 months with the contract may use of only you for the Department of Health, the Human Services Subpart C with the certification form with the representation multi-institution provide with the contractor to provide with the representation on behalf of the any of the contractor of the subcontractor with the engaged with the research activity with the institutional review board reviews required with the institutional review board disapprove of the suspend with the terminate require with the modification any of the research activity under the contractor immediately notify with the contracting of the reading of the institutional review board action. But the contractor shall bear fully responsible for performing safely feasibly all activities and contracting involved with the human subject with the complying of the rules regulation with the requirement that's concerned with the human subject with neither the contractor subcontractor agent of the contractor employee with the contractor nor any person organization institution group that can be involved in perfect with such activity under the contractor shall the team of the contractor with the agent or employee with the department of the federal government for respect with such activity the contractor give the discharge with the obligation of the duty for the undertake with the work pursuant with the thereto with the professional judgment with otherwise independent contract with the imputing liability with the part of the government for acts of the subcontractor with the employees upon the discovery of the non-compliant with the requirements stated with the statute with the call of the contractor should correct with the non-compliance assumed with its practice with the typical of the later one business day with the contractor office determines scope of the protection of human itself with the subject with the coordinator with the office of the acquisition grant risk management office with the financing officer operations sponsoring office of the contractor complying with the requirements sustained with the statute with the call of the contracting office may suspend with the work with the contractor on board profit until the determined with the contractor correct with the non-compliance contracting office authorized to continue with the work initial notice for the suspension initial notice for the suspension with the cause of the communicate with the orally writing with the contracting office and notice suspend with the contracting office which shall provide with the written notice suspension of the work under the call of the notice shall contain with the following with the effective date with the suspension work with the requirement that the stand with the contractor is out of compliance with the any special interest with the suspension of the work. 3. Assume that as authorization of the resume of the work with the contracting officer for the term of the non-compliance have the remedy for the best interest of the government. The contract officer may authorize the work to resume under the contract with the contracting officer provide written over the contractor such authorization. No non-compliant with the requirements stated with the certificate with the cause with the main result of the government and termination for the contractor to default with the full and part and then according for the FARS 49,401. Such termination may be diluted with additional with the suspension of the work with the contract nothing here and shall with the control with the limits of the government right with the termination contract. Failure to comply with the terms of the requirements stated with the regulation will leave the information protection human and reach of the activity subjects can be found with the Department of Protection human and subject of the reach of the website with the contractors also may offer the contact with the following with obtaining the information with the regulation protection human subject. The way policy with the guideline protection human subject coordinate with the U.S. Department of Education offer the financial operation offer the acquisition grants risk management 400 Maryland Avenue Southwest Austin Washington D.C. 2022 4331 34 52 242 73 protection student private complying with the FERPA. As in October 23rd, pursuant with the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, with the implementation of Title 34, Part 99, Department of Designee with the contractor to serve with the authorized representative of the Secretary with the authorized education with the solely with the purpose of carrying out with the audit evaluation federally supported education programs, enforcement compliant with the federal law requirements of the related to federally supported education programs, conducting survey on behalf of the department and develop with the validate with the administrative predicative tests, administrative the student aid programs, and prove the institution specified for the scale with the working schedule with the similar documents of the contract. Contractors will collect receive the access of the following personal identifiable for the information due with the education record with the protect with the family education rights and for the accurate purpose specified with the personal identification and the education of the student education record calculated with the access of the contractor identified with the requiring activity. The contractor will also give the personal identifying identity information to meet for the purposes set forth in paragraph 8 of the call of the act of the scope of the duration specified the statement of the schedule of the similar documents of the contract prior with the collective and the receipt of the PIA. Contractor status shall establish policy and procedure consistent with FERPA, other federal confidential privacy options with unprotected personal identification information for the disclosure except for the department with the unauthorized, including limiting with the personal identification information only with the authorized representative with the limited legitimate interest for the purpose set forth with the paragraph 8 of this call with the extent of the required with the ensure that the contractor complying with the provision of purpose of the federal provision of the contractor shall forward with the department and to authorize agents except for the facility installation technical capability operation document record database the policy proceed with the system with the contractor any of the subcontractor. Contractor shall limit access to the personal identification information of the contract personnel with the requirement of the personal identification information satisfied with the contract obligation under the contract. The contractor can collect and receive the access to the personal identification information for the contract on behalf of the educational agency with the institute of the contract shall conduct such a study with the manager that does not permit the personal identification of the variances due with it by any more with the representative of the contract subcontract or legitimate interest of the study. One of the person's purpose of the once for the purpose of the personal identification information was collected in excess of the satisfaction of the contract, the department immediately seek with the department with the instruct for the authorization for government to district for the personal identification information according to the law. If the contractor subcontract with the contractor work with the requirement of the collection of the extent of the personal identification information of the contractor shall include with the paragraph H any subject contract with the favor of the contractor should ensure that the subcontractor comply with the term of the condition and the obligation of the impose of the contractor here under FERPA. Violation of subcontractor provisions set forth attributed to the contract with the publication publicity is in March 2001 unless otherwise specified with the contract with the contractor incur with the publication of the rights promote with the result of the work of the contract copy of each of the article works will with the contract with the publication promptly. See with the contractor officer with the representative of the contractor shall also inform the representative with the article and work of the published and furnish copies of the published form of the contract acknowledged with the support of the Department of Education. Publicize the work under the contract within the medium of the acknowledged shall receive the substantial travel the project have been funded at least part of the federal fund due with the Department of Education with the contract number and for the number in contact with the publication that does not necessarily reflect the view of the policy with the U of the Department of Education but does it mean trade name of the commercial private organization implied with the doors of the U.S. government. 3452 to 2771 advertising award with the contractor agree with not to refer to the awards the issue for the product services delivered to the Department of Education commercial advertising in such manner as a state whether implied with the product or service provided by the interest of the federal government to consider the federal government to superior with the other product services. Part 22772, use and non-disclosure agreement is in March 2011, except for the providing the paragraph with the call for the proprietary with the technical data computer software to deliver the government for the first with the modification, reduction, reproduction, or leave of the person, the performance to deliver the disclosure may not be provided with the third party with the intent of the recipient complete with the signs with the non-disclosure agreement, the paragraph C with the call for the release of the disclosure data, specific detention, with the intent of the receiver, the authorized, with the modified, with the reproduce, with the release, perform the display, with the discover the priority data, technical data subject to the limited results rights for the computer software for the restricted rights typically with attachment and use of the non-disclosure agreements. For intended relief of the disclosure authorized proprietary data technical data computer subject with a special license rights modified paragraph C1 and 4 clause for the either for the condition with the consistent with the license requirement of the government recipient obligation regarding the modification, reduction, reproduction, relief of the performance display with the disclosure of the data and software. Requirement use with the non-disclosure agreements if it does not apply with the government contract to require access to the third-party data and software for the performance of the government contract with the contained with the title clause 34, 52, 22, 7 and 73, limitation for the use of the disclosure furnished information mark of the restrictive legends, prescribed for the non-disclosure agreement, the use of the non-disclosure agreement that undersigned with the insert of the name of the authorized representative of the insert of the company name here with the referred to with the recipient required for the government, provide with the recipient proprietary the data of the technical with the computer software here and the referred to with the data of the recipient with the government modification, reproduction, relief, and performance, display disclosure right with the restricted data with the identified with attachment with the agreement to consider with the receiver the touchdown with the recipient agrees with the data strictly in degree accordance with the agreement. The recipient should be given the modified with the release of the performance, the display of the or the scope of the data for the procure marked as small business initiative, the reach of the rights, the legend of the government of the purpose that shall not do so with the commercial purpose of the recipient shall not relieve the performance, display of the scope of the data, express written permission over the contractor whose name is the of the restricted legend if the contractor to any of the person of the other subcontractor, supplier, prospective subcontractors, or suppliers who have required the data submit to the perform contract with the recipient shall the require with the subcontractor supply of the perspective of the subcontractor with the supply of the design with the give it on disclosed agreement with the disclose with the relation with the data such purpose of the agreement that may be consistent with the terms of the agreement. Use modify the reproduce the relief the perform the display with the disclose with the proprietary data or the technical data marked with the limited right for the legend with the special attachment to the agreement for the relief the perform the display with the disclosure with the other person not authorized unless the special attachment is to the agreement expressly permitted with the writing in the contractor. Use the computer software marked with the restricted right the legend with the only with the perform contract number with the insert contract number the recipient shall not for the example the inhibit the decompile the assemble the reverse engineer with the software time and share with the computer program more than one computer at a time and the recipient may not be relieved of the perform of the play display of the disclosed the software to unless for the express permitted written with the licensor or the names of the restricted legend. 4. Use the modified reproduce relief of the performance of the display with the scope of the data marked with a special license right with the complete with the contract with the officer C paragraph with the A2 with the code with the amended with the data none of the data requested with the mark with the special license rights legend. 2. With the recipient agree with the data for the established operating procedure with the physical security measure with the design with the protect with the data for the invert and the relief of the disclosure of the unauthorized third parties. Recipient agree with the accept of the data without any of the government representation suitable for the intent of the use of the warrant whatsoever the disclaimer that does not affect the obligation of the government may have regarding data with especially with the contract performance of the contract with the recipient may enter with the agreement the director with the contractor with the restricted use of the modification production release performance the display with the disclosure of the data with the recipient agree with the identify with the hold harmless for the government and its agent for the employee with the average claim of the liability with include with the attorney fee for the cost of the court costs and with the expense of the rising out of the any way related to the misuse of the unauthorized modification reproduction release performing a display with a disclosure data the received from the government will restrict the legend with the receipt with any of the person received with the relief of the disclosure of data. Recipient execute the agreement the benefit of the contract third party benefits for the agreement in addition with any of the rights may have the consent they have the right of direction act against recipient any other person recipient relieve the disclosure of the data and seek the damage of any of the breach agreement that otherwise enforce any agreement. Recipient agree with the destroy the data with all the copies of the data in possession no later than 30 days after the day they show in paragraph 8 with the agreement 2 with the have all the person with the release of the data so with the day and notify with the contractor of the data has been destroyed. The agreement shall have the effect of the period commencing with the recipient execute the agreement ending on with the entry of the day of the obligation imposed with the end by the agreement shall survey expiration term and agree with the recipient's business name and the authorized representative of the date and date representative type name and title. 342, 334, 52, 27, and 73, limitation of the disclosure of the government furnished information marked for the restricted evidence, as of March 2001, for a contract with the data of the producer, the friend of the acquire of the term, the limited derive of the restricted rights defined with the right of the data general call with the FARs 52, 20, 27, 14, party data technical with the computer server to provide with the contract government furnished information with the contract may subject with the restricted use of the modification, reproduction, or leave of the performance of the display with further disclosure. Proprietary data, legend of the restricted disclosure, use of the data of the contractor shall modify for the reproduce of the platform, disclose of the proprietary data, receive of the government for the proprietary of the restricted legends, only in performance with the contractor shall not, without with the express of the written permission with another party of the zone with the data of the leave, the disclosure of the rest of the data software, and Person with the GFI marked with a limited restricted legend with the contract with the modifier with the reproduce with the perform with the display with the technical with the receive with the governor with the limited drive with the legend with the computer software receive with the restrict with the right the legend with the only with the performance with the contract with the contractor should not without any express with the written permission with the party with the names appears in the legend relief with the disclose with the transfer of the data software to any with the person. The GFI marked with a specially negotiated license right in the legends contractor should with the reproduce with the release perform with the display with the priority with the technical with the computer server with the receive with the converter with a specially negotiated license legends only permitted with the licenses for the ad software may not be released with the disclosure of the other person unless the person is by license prior to the leave the disclosure intended to receive the completed use of the non-disclosure agreement with the contractor shall modify the paragraph C13 with the use of the non-disclosure of 34, 52, 227, and 72. In fact, recipient obligation regarding the modification, reproduction, relief of the performance display with the disclosure of the data software, identification, creation, third-party beneficiary right of the contractor agree with identify with the hold harmless with the government and its agent with the employee with the every claim of the liability, including attorney fee of the court cost of the expense for the rising out of any way related misuse of the authorized modification, reproduction, relief of the performance display with the disclosure, proprietary data, technical data, computer software, receive of the government, restrict with the legend of the contract to any of the person with the contract. Here's release disclose such data the software. The contractor agreed with the party who had names appear with a restricted legend, in addition with the rights it may have with the third-party beneficiary who have the rights for the direction against the contract with any of the person with the contract, relief of the disclosure of the data, such data with the software with the unauthorized duplication, relief of the disclosure, proprietary data, technical data, computer software, subject to restricted legends. Alright, 342, 34, 52, 228, 70 required insurance, March 2011. Alright, the contractors should procure with the maintain stuff with the insurance with the law of regulation, include with the not limited requirement of the FARS Part 28.3 with the prior written approval of the contractor shall with the require with the restrict with the insurance with the policy with the premium with the contract proposal with the tree with the direct cost under with the contract with the respect with the pros closed qualified programs health with insurance with the type of the any of the insurance with the policy with the submitted with the contracting officer with the approval upon request. B. Unless otherwise authorized with the writing contract with the contractor shall not procure with the maintain with its own protection insurance with the covering law for the destruction with the damage of the government property. 34, 52, 231, 71, invitational travel cost, October 2, 2023. No invitational travel to the time of the official government with the travel to connect with the non-federal employee in order to provide the direction for the presentation topics over the facilitator for the federal advisory committee with the act for the advising the area with the expertise for the government with the provide with the under the contract association with the contract unless the consent is provided below the cost of an invitation with the travel under the contract was done identify with the consent with the section with the call for the unable to unless contractor receives written contest consent with the contracting offer the prior with the insurance with the cost of the contractor wish for the reimbursement of the cost related to the invitational travel request must be within writing at least 21 days for the cost of the will be incurred with the contractor must include the following with the invitational travel cost integral fulfillment with the government requirement of the contract proposed cost must be in accordance with the federal travel regulations the lack of timely response from the contract offer must constitute with the constructive acceptance of the liability of the proposed charge consequently herein given by the contractor to 34 52 232 70 limitation of the costs and funds March 2011 according to the circumstances for 34704A1 when the contractor submitted the following information writing with the contract the name and address of the contract the number expiration date contract of the items and the amount will see with the estimated the contract for the limited of the funds allocated with the elements of the cost change with the original estimate with the example of the label of the material of the travel the overhead furnished in the following order original estimate cost incurred of the date with the estimated cost of completion revised estimated amount of adjustment with the factors reasonable with the increase latest date by the funds with available the contract avoid the delays of the performance of work stoppage with the other impairments fixed fee with the provided with the contract of chain with the cost overrun fund change fixed fee that made only to reflect the chain with the scope of the work with the justified increase with the decrease of fee 232.71 incremental funding March 2011 insufficient funds are not presently available to cover the total cost to complete with the project of discussed the solicitation however the government intends to negotiate with the board with the contract to even the incremental fund concept of the described and clause of the limited type of limitation funds of R52 232.22 under this clause included the name of the result of the contract of the initial funds will be obligated under the contract the cost of it cover the estimated performance period additional funds intended but allotted with the contract with the contract modification will include the full estimated cost of the entire period of the performance in on 10 of the time which stand with the government will not obligate with the reimbursement of the contract cost include excess periodic allotments for the nor will the contractor be obligated to perform in excess of the amount allotted. 3452, 237, and 72 limitation government obligations, October 23rd, 2023. October 2023. Sufficient funds are not presently available to cover the total price of the contract line item. The listing in the paragraph of the contract line with identified with the paragraph L with the below the incremented from with the cover the identified with the period performance. Additional funds intended to provide with the applicable contractor line item. The contract modification include the full price for the entire period of the performance. Not seem the government would not be obligated to pay with the contract amount with the payable to the extent with the amount actually allotted. Nor will the contractor be obligated to perform in excess of such amount. The contractor line items in the paragraph L clauses are incremental funded with the paragraph L with the allotment of the amount with the presently available the payment allotted for the contractor line items good for the termination cost for the government's conveyance for the allotment scheduled to provide for the day of the last day of the contract performance for which the estimated allotted amount will cover the parties that can contemplate with the government may allow with additional funds for the incremental the contractor line with the owner of the contract up to the full price for the special of the contractor agree with the performance of the work under the contract line item with the point of the total amount of the pay with the payable to government over the contractor applicable the contract line item to include the estimate cover the estimated event of the termination contract line over the government conveys for the approximate of the total amount of the currently allotted such of the contract line items is notified with the date of the special for the allotted schedule paragraph L with the cause of the contractor notified with the contractor of the writing at least 90 days prior to the day of the which of the contractor best judgment of the work will reach for the point of the total payable amount of the government incurred with any of the cost of the termination of the conveyancy will approximately 85% of the total amount of the contract performance applicable for the contract line item the notification for estimated the date when the appointed with the reach for the two estimated with additional funding with the difference with the continuing the performance of the contract line items over the day of the paragraph level the cause of the mutually agreed upon substantial the date see with the after notification presume the paragraph of the year of the cause of the additional funds is not allotted identified in the paragraph of the level of the day identified with the contract notification that may not be agreed substitute with the day of the contract written request contract officer may terminate with the government conveyance of the contract line item for such of the additional funds that have not been allotted contractor estimates of the funds available will allow the continue the discharge of the obligation beyond with the day but it may specify the later day with the request to terminate with the applicable with the contractor line with the contracting officer terminate with the contractor line items on the later day with no event over the contractor authorized to continue with the work of the contractor line items beyond the time of the amount payable to include with the cost of termination government conveyance equal to the funded allot. If solely by reason failure of the government to allow with additional funds of the dictate within paragraph L over the amounts sufficient with the timely performance of the contract line item that were defined with paragraph L of the call of the contract include with the call for the additional call for the delay of the performance of the work on the contract additional funds are allotted. Contract may require the equatable adjustment of the price of the increase of the probative target billing of the concealing with the price of the when applicable of the applicable contract or level the title and delivery of the role for the written require the contract offer the sufficient document support such equatable adjustment with the failure to agree with such equatable adjustment with the year under with the dispute with the concern of the question of the fact of the meaning of the cause of the dispute with the notwithstanding anything contrary here and nothing in an event with equatable adjustment under the paragraph D with the due with the contract with the call for the arise with the relate with the contract or breach of the notification obligation paragraph B with the cause except as required that under the provision of the contract specified citing state with the exemption call for the government is not obligated to pay with the goods and services reimburse cost of the termination government conveyance except for the total amount allowed by the government contract line item identified in paragraph L with the call of the contractor is not authorized to continue with the performance contract line items identified in paragraph L with the cause of the excess of the amount allotted by the government to applicable contract line items and even the cause of the total amount of the payable the government to the event with the termination contract line item the conveyance would include with the reasonable cost profit termination settlement costs of those items. F. No communication representation of the form other than writing contract officer shall affect the amount allowed by the government to contract with the applicable contract line item of the government not obligated with the reimbursement of the contract with any cost success with the total amount of the government allowable contract items incurred with during the cost of the contract with the result of the termination of the government at May time prior to termination allot additional funds for the performance of the contract line items identified in paragraph L of the cause. When funds of the allotted with the continued performance contract line of the defined paragraph L with the party of the work with the periodic can perform with the covered in the fund with the provision clause will apply with the the manner additional funds of the agreed substitute with the date with the contract modified accordingly. Termination provisions call for the do not limit the rights of the government terminating contract with the whole and the part call for the event with a breach with the default with the contract provisions call for the limited to the work allotment the funds with the contract line item set forth in paragraph L with the call for the clause no longer applies only with the contract fund except with the right rights over the obligation party concerning equitable adjustment with negotiating paragraph D with the clause with nothing in this clause with the right of the government to terminate the contract and the whole part of the vacancy with the clause K with nothing will shall be contributed the authorization voluntary shall be the acceptance of the otherwise prohibited under Title 31 U.S. Standard Code 1342 and L incremental funds are allowed within contract aligned items under the following contract as follows. 3452-237-70 agency level protest October 23, 2023. Protest of the agency that submitted with the contracting officer in court with the FARS 33103 with the D4 with the interest party may require the independent review of the level above of the contracting officer, the alternate with the consideration contracting officer protest silent on its matter. Consideration decision made with the contracting officer. 3452-237-70 service of the consultants of the March 2011 except the otherwise expressly provided with the elsewhere with the contract with the not received with the provision with the call of the contract and with the subcontract for 244-2 prior to the written approval of the contract officer shall be required for the employee with the contractor to pay with the consultant with the under this contract with the utilization share with the consolation with the contract using the daily rate set forward with the elsewhere with the contract for the amount set for the 800 excluding the travel the cost of the service the consultant under the contract with the non exceed will exceed 10 days in the calendar year with the contract the officer of the approval of the required of the contractor shall withstand with the furnish with the contracting officer with the information concerned with the need of the consultant for the reasonable fee to be paid with the include without limited where the fees be paid with the consultant with the lowest fee of the charge with the consultant with the other and performing consultant with the service of similar nature. Alright, 237-71, observe the administrative costs for the March 2011. The contractor shall identify federal holiday to observe the contract with the contract performance required with the contractor all of their times compensated with the absence of the expense and to do with the administrative close for the government facility with the operations due with the incremental where of the presidential decree of the administrative the issue with the government personnel received the earlier dismissal instructions and keep the contract performed with the government facility the facility is covered the vendor made arrangement for the performance continue with during the closure of the contract set of the appropriate 239 7 of the internet protocol of the October 2023 any system hardware firmware with a network component developed procured with the acquired support with the performance of the contract should be capable of transmitting receiving the process for storing digital information across the boundary for the utilize of the next generation protocol version 6 defined in the USG version 6 profile of the most recent NIST special publication 502.67b the NIST version 6 profile most recent NIST publication 502.67a special new IP product for the system developed the acquired product must be an Internet Protocol version 6 technical capabilities outlined most recent by the USG version 6 capability table UCT maintain interoperability both the Internet Protocol version 6 existing Internet Protocol version 4 system products however the available contractor vendor Internet Protocol version 6 technical support development implementation field product management exemption of the Internet Protocol version 6 requires the agency CIO to get advanced written approval. Alright, 342.52.239.71 Department Informational Security Privacy Requirements as of October 23. Contractors shall at all times maintain the compliance with the most current reversion of the Department Security requirements of the set forth with the Department Information Security within privacy requirements of the requirements posted with the ED.gov defined with the contract about with the BSP HTML with the contractor notified with the Department Information Security Privacy requirement has been updated. Any such change with the material increase with the decree for the cost of the time and the crowd with the performance aim with the pro of the work on with the contract with the not change with the contract may require the equatable adjustment of the contract per the delivery schedule applicable with the contractor shall meet with the equatable adjustment of the contract per the delivery schedule of both the modified with the contractor must have the right to equate with the adjustable with the under with the call with the third day with the day with the receipt with the notice change with the requirement of the hour with the contractor will determine that the fact with the justified with the contractor may receive with the act with the final with the request with the equatable adjustment with the submitted final payment with the contract failure to agree to adjustment with the dispute cause however nothing in the clause shall execute the contract for proceeding with the contract chain with the contractor shall incorporate the substance of the clause of the term of the requirement to include with the paragraph of all the care so paragraph with the requirement of the subcontractor acknowledge the same in the violation of the subcontractor provision set forth in the clause attributed by the contractor failure to comply with the clause with the embedded the Department of Information Security privacy requirement may result in the termination of the contract default or clause due to performance of the contract does or does not include the following acts of the collection of the maintenance of information by half of the Department of Information Technology product system and the hardware thereof that are used to operate with the contractor by half of the Department of use of the performance of the furnishing of the product for the IT product server the system hardware the services include with the agency hosted outsourced cloud-based solutions as well as the IT equipment that is required with the contract support with the contract performance that does include with the selected categorization shall be below in accordance with the Federal Information Processing Standards 199 standard of the Security Categorization Federal Information System Information Security categorization applicable to each security objective shall be determined confidential, low, moderate, high, integral, low, medium, or high, availability, low, moderate, or high, overall risk, low, medium, or high. To performance contract does or does not involve personal identifiable information defined in the Office Management Budget A130. Performance of the contract does or does not involve controlled unclassified information defined in Title 30 2 CFR 2002-4H. 4270 litigation and claims, March 2011. The contractor shall give the contractor the officer of the meeting notifying in writing a legal final filed against the contracting arising of the performance contract included in proceeding before the administrative agency court of law, also included not limited to performance subcontractor here under the claimant against the contractor cost shall be liable to cosment plea will cause except the otherwise direct for the contractor shall immediately furnish for the contractor officer for the copy to present the papers to receive it under the action claim, and they recover the contractor off the contractor shall have the effective assignment, subrogation in favor of the government and all contractor rights and claims except for the against the government arising out of the action of the claimant against the contractor authorized the government to settle with the defend with the action of the claimant the representative of the contractor for the taking charge of the action. If the settlement the dispute of the action of the claimant is to undertake with the government, the contractor shall furnish for the reasonable require the assistance however if an action given for the contractor does not cover the policy, ensure that the contractor shall notify the contracting officer to proceed with the defense of the action good faith to the extent that it does not conflict applicable policy, and ensure for the contracting officer of their approval to settle the action of the claim, and the government shall not be liable to expend the defending of the action any of the costs relating to the loss thereof. The extent of the contractor would have been compensated with the instrument of the required law, regulation, contractor clause of the written document, direction, contracting of the contract failed to discover the through of his own fault and negligence. In the event, unless the otherwise expressly provided with the contractor shall be reimbursed identifiable by the government for any of the costs expense of the liability contractor may incur the subject by the reason loss, injury, or the damage of the person or to real or personal property of the third parties may arise for the performance of the contract. 34, 52, 22, 42, 71, notice of the government delays, March 2011. Contractors shall notify the contractor of the actual of the potential situation when they include but not limited to labor dispute, the delay with the threatened delay with the timely performance of the contract with the contractor shall immediately give them written notice of the include all relevant information. 34, 52, 242, 73, accessible meeting of the conference seminars person with a disability is in March 2011. Contractors are for the meeting of the conference seminar over the whole performance of the contractor meet applicable standard with accessible to the person with disability pursuant to Section 504 Rehabilitation Act 1973 as amended in Title 29 U.S. Code 794, any implementation regulation of the department. 3442, 3452, 243, 70 key personnel. October 2023, personal and designated the key personnel of the contract to be essential to the work being performed prior to the diverting any specified individual other programs or substituting any other personnel. Specified personnel of the contract to notify the contracting officer of the reasonable advance that should submit justification proposed situations, substitution with insufficient detail with the permanent evaluation impact for the contract effort. No version substitutions may be divided with the contract without written consent of the contracting officer provided with the contracting officer may ratify with a diversion substitution in writing. The ratification shall be the consent of the contracting officer required by the clause of the contract shall not for the reflect addition of the deletion of the key personnel of the person who have been identified with the key personnel of the performance of the contract, labor category and name. Alright, 342, 3452, 247, 70, foreign travel to March 2011. Foreign travel should be undertaken without written prior with approval of the contracting officer of the EU of the foreign travel, meaning for the outside of the continental United States defined for federal travel regulations. Travel to non-foreign areas including the states of Alaska, Hawaii, Commonwealth, to Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Northern Marina Islands territories positioned in the United States consider the foreign travel for purposes of this clause. And that completes Department of Education Acquisition Regulations 3452 Solicitation Provision Contract Clause Tape 2.